Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about designing and planning. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, in most engineering disciplines, creating blueprints, designs, and planning are foundational steps before building a product. Why is it that software developers dislike these activities and uh, do things like planning and documentation before starting to code? Because they are fundamentally very different things, I would say. Software development is like, or software engineering, we call it engineering and so forth, and we are actually, that's absolutely true. But like, if you think about any other form of engineering, these steps that they are happening as well. It's just that they are in this situation, you're usually baking them together a little bit, and at various stages of any product that you're going to build, you have different stages that in a regular product might have to be done by other people. Like to give you an example, so if you were to design, you wanted to create a new type of running shoe, for example. Well, the engineers who are going to build the actual shoe or so forth may or may not be involved in the first stages of the design part. And frankly speaking, that is exactly the same thing as in software development. The product managers and the designers and so forth, they're usually already designing and doing things. The software developers are just there to execute and to make the actual thing happen, right? To build the thing. And when you do things like 3D modeling or like designs and so forth, that's a completely usually a very different field. And it's the same thing with buildings. You have architects and so forth, and they are doing these sorts of things. Like the builders who are supposed to build the thing, that's a different story. And then depending on, again, like it's this is so loose that, yeah, I mean, guys, engineering is not just like one gigantic thing that everything works the same way. It would be the, I mean, if you were to say something along the lines like, why is it that all writers avoid, they don't like writing dialogue or so forth and so forth, and like writing, it's a gigantic area. There's like 100 million different things that you could be writing about, and people, depending on what you're doing or what you're writing about, you're going to have different approaches and different, like, it's a completely different area. And the same thing goes for software. To me, it's not a question of that people don't like activities such as designing and planning, or like, I would challenge you to find any engineer, any person whatsoever who is super interested in documentation, for example. I mean, have you ever talked to engineers from other areas, or like electric engineer, mechanical engineers? Doesn't matter which one. Like, do you think that they are very interested in the documentation? I mean, if you go and buy your product in the store and you call up the company who built that thing, and then you take out your manual and you ask, okay, so who built the thing for you, like the manufacturer? The guys and the girls who made the product, like who designed it and so forth, did they write the instruction manual for you, the customer? I'm pretty sure they didn't. I'm pretty sure that was more than a few people. But in software development, it's slightly different because a lot of I mean, even the product documentation is the same deal. Like if you go to Google's websites or Facebook's or whatever, like the FAQs and like all the information there, do you think that they are written by the software developers? Like, we are talking about, I think there is a little bit of like a misunderstanding here about a few assumptions here. And my point being that I don't really see any reason why you would claim that developers don't like designing and planning. It's just that, as I said, due to the nature of the work, designing and planning in, say, if you're going to do a building, making a building versus making like a REST API, these are very different scopes, gigantically like difference. And like when you're designing a building, there's 100 million things that you have to do, where like entire different professions are involved in order to just actually create the blueprints. And that is not the case for software development in many cases. In many cases, all you really need here is UI design or something like that, and then the only unit of an individual that is necessary in order to make that thing happen is the software developer. And there are other professions as well where that is true. Like if you're going to build like a power plant, well, that's going to be a lot of people who need to be involved in designing and planning, and that's why you actually need to do that, because there's so many people who are going to be executing on that thing, that you don't like have just one person sit there and like do all the things and so forth and so forth. But at the same time, you can't like have every person who's ever going to work on that thing to sit in the same meeting and design and plan and do all that sort of stuff, right? It has to do with the scale usually, guys, like how much you put into the preparation of work has to do with scale usually, or I mean in some cases it's definitely complexity and so forth. And I don't think I know any engineer ever who would say that no, I don't really like designing a good system. It is all the manifestation of it. If you're forced to sit in a bunch of meetings and sit and discuss with people who don't fucking know the first thing, anything about what you do or how it works and so forth, that's going to be pretty tedious. It doesn't matter if you're an architect or if you're an engineer or whatever you are. Like I don't, that's a human thing. Designing and planning and stuff like that, that's super fun as long as the activity is engaging. And for software developers, the feedback loop is pretty quick. Because if you're designing and planning and creating blueprints and stuff like that, there's a lot more that goes into creating a blueprint for something than for me when, let's say that someone tells me, oh, I need, as I said, a REST API or a UI design or something like that. I literally just need a UI artboard or some basic instructions about roughly what the thing is going to do, right? And then I can go off and like just start doing it. To me, that is more closely to like being a writer or an artist or something like that, where the only thing I need to know from my customer is, okay, roughly what's the picture going to be about, or so forth and so forth. And then my design process is just to box out the basic shapes and stuff like that. And that is, I think, enjoyable to quite a lot of people. It's the same thing for software developers. Software developers love designing and planning as long as the activity is engaging. And I will challenge you to find anybody who finds this, who is in a creative field, or it doesn't even have to be that, anybody who works as an engineer or something like that that enjoys documentation or writing documentation. There are probably people out there, but on average people don't enjoy it because it might not be a stimulating activity. So what I want you to take away from this is that I don't really agree with that developers dislike designing and planning, because the thing that I usually tell people is that if you want to use hackathons, in my opinion, the best way holistically, because usually hackathons in IT companies are, you know, cross team and like different people and so forth. And the usual thing that happens is that you decide you're going to build something, right? And then the product managers and the designers and like all the various staffs that you might have, they sit down with the developers, and then everybody goes, oh, we're going to build this awesome thing. And then, you know, it takes a few hours to plan and discuss all the cool things that this thing is going to do, and then we go into execution mode, which is where everybody who is not a software developer can't help. They can't be involved because basically the coding part, or like writing the software, takes a lot longer, and then nobody else has anything to do. And so what I usually tell people is to use those, so like instead of like trying to write the whole thing, try to come up with a cool new idea and pitch a concept. Because I've never been in a hackathon team or any group whatsoever who didn't like coming up with a cool new idea and then mapping it out and discussing features and considerations. Everybody's always very engaged in that. In my opinion, at the very least, they're super happy to do that. And that is for software as well as anything I've ever like cool startup ideas, so engaging discussions and stuff like that. A lot of people like that. But when it comes, as I said, it's down to the manifestation of the thing. When it comes to sitting and like planning out in painful detail the every little nitty gritty thing about something, I mean, I'm sure that the mechanical engineers and the electrical, you're going to have to speak for me, guys, but I'm pretty sure, because I do have some friends who work in electrical engineering, it's not like they love that stuff. There are things they love about their work and things they don't like about their work. And I'm pretty sure that if I say the thing I was saying, that it's all about the actual activity that makes the difference if you enjoy this or if you don't enjoy it. I'm pretty sure that is sort of universally true regardless of what you're doing. And I don't really think that there is a big difference in how software developers think and what makes them enjoy their work and what an electrical engineer, for example, like, we might really like the coding, and for them it might be designing circuits or working with whatever, right? Everybody's a little bit different, and every the scope of the projects and what you're doing and so forth varies, then obviously various things are going to be enjoyable to different people. So I'm not really sure where you're going with this, but I don't really agree that developers dislike designing and planning. And I do think that practically everybody I've ever met hates writing documentation for other people at the very least. Have a great day.